Now, before we even get started today, or get after it, as Chris Cuomo would say, as we go through the clips and I once again point out the utter embarrassment our current political leadership truly is, please keep the overarching theme in mind, and that's the out-of-control political grandstanding at any cost. Never mind facts or public servant professionalism. Just score one for the team at any cost. So things got kind of crazy on Capitol Hill this week, but that's nothing really new these days, right? While most people were focused on AG Merrick Garland being thoroughly exposed by Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz over on the Senate side, one of our lovely leftist House committees was busy grilling energy executives. So what followed was the unfortunately typical delusional insanity that flowed like cheap champagne at a rookie mid-level rapper's first night hosting a penthouse party. Yes, that visual almost fits. Now, when I say things were nuts, I'm not just exaggerating. To be frank, this was some of the craziest shit I've ever seen uttered by politicians during a hearing, and I was completely focused through every moment of the national disgrace we now call the Brett Kavanaugh spectacle. Now, before we dig any further into this, let's take a quick commercial break to pay some bills, and folks, considering how much of the stuff we consume on a daily our lovely drooler-in-chief has floating around somewhere off the coast of Los Angeles, if you haven't gotten some Patriot meals, you probably should consider doing so. Friends, I'm going to point out the obvious. It seems like big government and big tech are trying to destroy America. Everything they touch turns into a disaster. Pretty soon the whole system will fall apart, and the first thing to fall will be the food supply chain. So, do you have enough emergency food to get through a serious long-term crisis where you can't get food at the grocery store? Most people don't, and they'll panic when the time comes. That is why the smart move now is to get long-term storage emergency food before things go bad. I highly recommend My Patriot Supply. They've served millions of American families and have over 41,000 4-star and 5-star reviews. Their mission is your survival. And right now, you can save 25% on a 4-week kit of emergency food that will save the day, probably soon. Order a starter kit for each member of your family, and they'll ship everything quickly and discreetly to your door. Go to preparewithresurgence.com so you can claim your 4-week emergency food kit and save 25% in the process. That's preparewithresurgence.com, or hit that link in the description box. Okay, so we're not even going to go into low IQ Cori Bush's mind-numbing commentary about oil companies being tools of white supremacy. Once again, thank you St. Louis for the gift that just keeps on giving. We're not going to because we have third-grade visual tools to go over, courtesy of I'm Ugly and It's Your Fault, Katie Porter. This idiotic blue hair actually loaded up her car with rice to go on some Looney Tunes rant about oil and gas leasing. Oh, and I think she had candy. I'm pretty sure they were M&Ms. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they weren't jelly beans. She's probably a peanut M&M sort of gal. Let's watch.
The gentlelady from California, Ms. Porter, Ms. Katie Porter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard a lot about future plans for investment in renewable energy today. Ms. Watkins, Shell's 2020 annual report called for between $19 and $22 billion in near-term spending. Each M&M represents about $50 million in spending. Ms. Watkins, how much has Shell said it will spend in the near term on oil, gas, and chemical operations?
I think you just said we're going to be spending between $18 and $20 billion this year.
That's near term on total spending. How much on oil, gas, and chemical operations?
We're going to be spending.
Well, according to your annual report, you said you're going to spend 16 to 17 billion for oil, gas, and chemical, with another $3 billion for marketing. How much is Shell spending to spend on renewable energy?
This year, we'll be spending between $2 and $3 billion. $2
and $3 billion on renewables and energy solutions. In your testimony, you said, quote, meeting the demand for reliable energy while simultaneously addressing climate change is a huge undertaking and one of the defining challenges of our time. Ms. Watkins, does this look like a huge undertaking to you?
Congresswoman, what I can tell you is that there needs to be both a demand and a supply of clean energy, which is why we're working very closely with our customers so that that demand increases over time and we are
Ms.
ready
Watkins,
to supply.
to me, this does not look like an adequate response to one of the defining challenges of our time. This is greenwashing. Shell is trying to fool people into thinking that it's addressing the climate crisis when what it's actually doing is to continue to put money into fossil fuels. Mr. Summers, do you recognize the following statement? Banning federal leasing and development on federal lands and waters would derail decades of U.S. energy progress.
I do, Congresswoman.
That's your statement. How many of the Department of Interior's approved and ready to drill permits are currently unused?
Congresswoman, it takes a long time to develop these leases that
I
oil and
appreciate that,
gas
Mr. Summers. I'm just asking how many permits are unused?
Congresswoman, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding as to how these
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Summers, there are 7,700 permits unused. How many acres of public land are already leased by fossil fuel companies and not even used yet, just available for drilling whenever you decide?
Congresswoman, again, I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding as to how this process works and the time and resources.
Reclaiming my time. The answer is 13.9 million acres. To visualize how much land that is, if each grain of rice were 1 acre, that would be 479 pounds of rice. The American Petroleum Institute even opposed pausing more leasing on our lands. They even sued to stop it because apparently this acreage wasn't enough. Mr. Wirth, you serve on the American Petroleum Institute's executive committee. Do you support a pause on new oil and gas leases on federal land?
Congresswoman, access to resource in this country is essential to ensure the energy security of our country and
reclaiming my time. Mr. Lawler, do you support a pause?
The administration, and it's our hope that the pause ends soon. We think it's important to go
reclaiming
forward.
My time. Thank you for your answer. The answer there is no. Mr. Woods, do you support a pause on new federal and gas leases?
No.
Ms. Watkins, do you support a pause on new federal and gas leases?
No, I do not, because I think it's important.
You already have 13.9 million acres. This is equivalent to Maryland and New Jersey combined. How much more do you need? How much more acreage? You have 2 of our 50 states at a price that makes the Louisiana Purchase look like a ripoff, and you're not even using it. What more do you need? Iowa, Colorado, Virginia? Our public land belongs to the American people, not to big oil. When you lobby and you sue so that you could take more of our public land, you're saying too much is never enough. The American people are tired of this charade. I yield back.
Okay, now can we just start by asking why this ridiculously nasty House member is not in Washington asking these questions in person? At the very least, show up if you're going to devolve this committee hearing even further into some sort of uninformed female elitist blue-haired leftist struggle session. I mean, come on. She's vaccinated, as is everyone else on the committee as far as I can tell. There's no damn excuse for her fat, lazy ass to be appearing via Zoom at this point in the pandemic when she's paid to show up and do her actual freaking job. I mean, if we're being honest, if she's truly worried about her risk from the bat stew, there are some other things she could probably focus on, mainly her caloric intake. Regardless, sadly, Porter, like all the idiot Democrats participating in this public shaming, clearly has no idea about the things of which she attempts to speak of. 1. I'm not sure what the hell dumping rice out on the ground is supposed to symbolize, but 2. Oil and gas leases are not dependent on total acreage, as she asserts. Rather, they depend on market price and whether it is profitable to drill. If it's not, those leases are allowed to lapse. Her snarling accusations about oil companies having leases that total New York and New Jersey are, well, absolutely irrelevant. That's what makes the entire thing so ironic. This clip went viral on the left under the guise of Porter supposedly owning the oil executives by showing them that she's not misinformed, yet her entire rant is clearly evidence that she is, in fact, completely misinformed. But no surprise there, right? Things weren't done yet, though. One of my personal favorite angry, ugly leftists, Rashid Tlaib, went even more Twilight Zone, because of course she did. You can't just out crazy Tlaib. Come on now.
Mike Worth, when are you going to cut the check?
Congresswoman, I'm not trying to understand the context for your question.
That's okay. Okay, so
could I, excuse me, I'd like to correct something that you've
sure.
been provided with some inaccurate information. Noble Energy was not a subsidiary of Chevron in 2000.
Okay, you can submit it for the record, sir. So Chevron, you can submit it to the committee. Chevron has about 70 serious cases of environmental and community abuses in 31 countries worldwide, owing over $50 billion in judgments and settlements. Checks, literally, settlement debts that you all have. So, Mike, when are you going to cut the check?
Congresswoman, I'm not familiar with the number you
When are you going to cut the $50 billion check that you owe? It went through the courts. You owe $50 billion to communities in 31 countries.
Congresswoman, I'd be happy to take a look at the source for your information on this
Sure.
and get back to you on it, because I have no understanding of what.
Well, I have a message for you as Chevron CEO. I mean, you made what, $29 million last year in poisoning the planet? Mr. Worth, you can't arrest us all. You can't arrest the truth. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you?
Congresswoman, I am not exactly following.
So you're targeting and actions against the human rights lawyer Dotzinger. I mean, what you did there, your company, maybe through subsidiaries, I don't know. I just want to remind you, there are more of us than there are of you. You can poison the planet to make money, but we're going to defend the planet so we can live, and we will win. So, I need Chevron to cut the check. You owe $50 billion to indigenous communities and people that you harmed for profit. This is not about vilifying these companies. This is about accountability. You all know we're all paying the cost, from our public health to our environment, the actions that you take, and you're hiding behind subsidiaries, and it's wrong. These are residents putting ballot initiatives on their local ballot to make a difference to save our planet. Get out of the way so they can do the work for the people in the community they live in. Thank you, and I yield.
Okay then. Well, like everyone else, I honestly have no idea what in the hell she's talking about. I can't find any reference to her nonsensical claims. Maybe one of those stalwart fact-checkers can look into it. Folks, what gets me the most about these moments of idiotic grandstanding from far-left Democrats is that they say all this hate-filled, nonsensical, factless stuff while enjoying the fruits of what they supposedly despise. Katie Porter would not be able to appear on Zoom or drive that car she loaded with all that rice she'll obviously never eat without oil companies providing the energy necessary. Rashida Tlaib is speaking through a sound system and using a computer, neither of which would be possible without fossil fuels, obviously. I also don't see either of them stumping for nuclear energy. I suppose because that would be far too painless for all of us racists to adapt to. Wind and solar power are simply not viable at a large enough scale to power the entire world. Texas proved that last year. Those energy sources also have many drawbacks, including for the environment, never seem to get mentioned. And while these spoiled, obnoxious DC apparatchiks might not care, normal Americans are being crushed by high energy prices driven by their chosen policies. No one should forget that going into the next election, or forget how Trump fixed that going into the next presidential election.
This entire debacle of a hearing today has been reflective of the exact reasons why my colleagues across the aisle will lose their majority status very soon. We have a smashed economy. We've witnessed a disgraceful retreat from Taliban terrorists overseas, abandoning Americans. We have a disintegrated southern border. We have unbelievable inflation. We have medical oppression. We have parents, American parents, being threatened by our own DOJ for having the audacity to exercise their First Amendment rights to assemble and redress grievance. We have the companies brought before us today, American men and women, for a public beating by the Democrats on this committee. They've done incredible work to actually lower emissions. These companies have worked with scientists and engineers, not politicians, to reduce methane by 70% between 2011 and 2019. They've used innovation to clean up their industry on their own. Their facilities and plants are incredibly clean and safe. It's abhorrent that my colleagues across the aisle have called a so-called hearing today to demonize American industry whose products make modern life possible. Petroleum products are in everything, the clothes on our back, the wiring in our computers ourselves, our phones, all of the equipment used by our military, all medical supplies and equipment, paint, curtains, fabrics and appliances in our homes, fishing rods, lures, tents used by sportsmen, everything, all sports products. It's insane what my colleagues across the aisle are putting these good American men and women through and attacking American workers as our country dissolves around us. You push patriots too far. You've gone a bridge too far. We won't take it anymore.
As always, I want to thank you for watching. Some of this came by way of redstate.com. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.